So thank you for the very, very nice introduction. Yeah, so I tried to structure this talk in terms of my transition to academia and kind of why I chose to do that. Are you all undergrad or grad? I know a few undergrad. Okay, so a mix. Okay, so it's about half and half. It's probably too long, so I might speed through more of the research side, but a lot of it is, yeah, why did I decide to go to academia and kind of what did I learn while getting my PhD? A little bit's on actually what I did in case you guys are interested in that too, but we can talk about whatever you're most interested in. So very high level, yeah, I was an undergrad here in 2017. That's when I graduated, so 2012 to 2017 in this department. And then, yeah, I went to Caltech and I got my master's and my PhD, and now I'm back. So I am in two departments, mostly EC, and then a third ME, and my lab is now called the Dynamic Mobility, or Dynamo for short. So I have no students, but we are growing. So this is me as a freshman that was wearing my rat cap. I don't know, do they still give out rat caps? Okay, yeah. So I entered actually as a BME major. I thought I wanted to do, and I still do, assistive devices, and so I thought that was the home for it. Like many undergrads here, I switched my major. I feel like that's like 50% of all undergrads here switched in the first year. So I switched into mechanical engineering. I participated in a lot of very different activities, and I feel like that really helped me understand what I wanted when I came out. So I did 2 different study abroad programs because I was in state tuition. So it was a good decision for us out of staters to take advantage of that. So I did both the Oxford program, the learning program, which now I guess is called GT Europe. They changed the name on us. I did 4 different research labs. So I think this is very important for me to understand what type of research I like. So I did one with Dr. Kucha, Dr. Lindsay, and then my advisor in graduate school was Dr. Aaron Ames. He was actually a professor here when I was an undergrad, and then he moved to Caltech, and so I applied to Caltech to work with him. And so I met him through something called the SURE program, which some of us we've talked about before. I'll talk about it a little more for people who don't know what it is. And then Aaron Young started when I was an undergrad here, so I started working with him too. I also did a co-op with NCR, so I'll talk a little bit about my co-op experience. I think that really taught me what to expect from industry. So it gave me like a really unique perspective to actually directly compare the two through my experiences. Yeah, I did not like industry. We'll talk about it. And then I was in 2 different honor societies. That was fun to meet a lot of really smart people. And then I just did some other things too. So I was a supervisor for the CRC. That was kind of a cool student job opportunity here on campus. I was a grader for fluids. I don't really know why. I did not like fluids. And then, yeah, shell tutor for depth pods, which I like a little more. So my co-op with NCR. So it was a unique co-op. It was when they were still based in Alpharetta, and now they're like right down the street, which kind of sucks for me. So I drove like 30 minutes to an hour when they were still over there, and now they're right here. So I'm only slightly mad about that. But I worked really closely with the team of 5 engineers. And so my whole experience was basically the development of this POS, or point of sale terminal, from everything from the design. So it's mostly designed little parts. So this was a little bracket that I got to design. And I vividly remember my boss telling me, Megan, you can't make that. I was like, what do you mean you can't make it? He's like, you can't physically make that part. Like you have to punch something while you're like, basically the slide and the manufacturing process is not possible. And so I learned a lot about practical manufacturing through that design process. And then in the middle, it became a lot of prototyping. Can we do proof of concepts? And then it has water all over it. So we had to simulate, like, what if you spilled a big gulp on this point of sale terminal? So I was the person that got to dump the water on and then take it all apart. And then this was the first picture that I took in a Dunkin' Donuts when I actually saw the device for the first time, which was in Pasadena, funnily enough. And so, yeah, it gave me a good experience. I'll talk about maybe the pros and cons, but it was hands-on. This is the SURE program. So for those of you who don't know, the SURE program is a 10-week summer program. So it stands for Summer Undergraduate Research Experience, I believe. It targets people who might be underrepresented in STEM. And so women are included. And so this was the whole cohort at the time. So I think it was around 50 people. Lots of people, lots of very, very great people who have gone on to do amazing things. And we got paired with a faculty member, and then we presented our research at the end of it. So that's little junior Maegan standing next to the poster. And this was my research project. So this is an old picture with their names. He looks very young there. I look like a child. And then these are all people that I ended up working with. My actual project was just redesigning this foot. So this was my design. This was the existing design. We were trying to go towards multi-contact walking. So you can see you push off with the toe, land with the heel, push off with the toe, land with the heel. This prosthetic device. Of course, practically, a lot of my time was actually just spent machining. Oh no, the videos don't work. Okay. This presentation will be less exciting. That's okay. I think that's the effect of transferring. It's just a thing spinning. Actually, they might be pictures. These might be pictures. I think they're pictures. Yeah, a lot of my time practically as an undergrad was spent doing kind of stuff like this. Like I feel like us undergrads, we don't always get to do always the fun stuff. So most of my time is spent in the machine hall. So much so that last weekend I went downstairs to show a now colleague from Caltech of mine in the machine shop, and they were like, "Hey, you want to come in?" And like they still remember me down there, which is kind of fun. I spent too much time in that machine shop, but that's practically what research looked like. And so the first lesson is really the takeaway that I had between academia and industry. And so I think these are kind of some of the pros and cons that I was able to come up with. I think that industry is very structured, but you have little control over what it is that you're doing. And maybe you could argue, okay, if different companies are different, and I think that's very true. So some people did tell me that I should try working with a different company and give industry kind of a second chance. But for me, I liked research. And so, yeah, so in industry, it's structured, but I think you don't get a lot of control. So what does that mean? You have clearly defined goals. Like for me, we're trying to make this point of sale terminal. Like that is the goal. You can't stray from the goal. Like maybe you could argue you should do something else, but for the most part, they're not going to listen. You have very strict working hours because you're working as a team usually. So you have to be there at the same time as the other people on your team. And you don't really have a lot of flexibility over what to work on. For research, on the other hand, it's like the complete opposite where you have no structure and tons of control. And so I would argue that my job was to define what the project goal is. Like that is kind of the main part of research is you're actually trying to say, what is it that you're trying to do? And you're crafting that goal. There's no set working hours to the point where some of my friends in grad school became fully nocturnal. Would come in the lab at 9 p.m. and leave at 9 in the morning. That was their preferred operating scheme. That was over COVID, to be fair, so there were no rules. And then, yeah, you're really able to shape what it is that you want to do. As long as it fits, there's an asterisk, it has to fit within the lab's broader vision, but within that broader vision, you have some control. And so kind of to summarize it, like when I came home from the industry position, I was always very tired. And when I came home from the research position, I was very excited. And so that to me was like the true telling that I liked academia, I want to take back. So I applied to grad school. So I was accepted into 4 of the 5 programs that I applied to, which I'm very thankful for. It's hard to get people to look at you. And so I was deciding between Georgia Tech in the robotics program, Vanderbilt, Northwestern. Northwestern was actually the BME program. They have a pretty cool like rehab facility that's directly in the hospital, which is pretty cool, but it would have been way more on the medical side. And then Caltech. And so things that I considered, I think that for me, it was really what new perspective am I going to gain by going to this school? And so some faculty members here, as much as I love Georgia Tech, they did tell me, hey, you've gotten the perspective of Georgia Tech. It might be a good idea to go somewhere else and get a new perspective. And so it was a hard decision because I really liked Georgia Tech, but I was encouraged, go get a different perspective. And then they actually told me, think about coming back later. And now I'm here. I did read a lot of papers, so I think you can get a good sense for feelings of the lab based on the types of papers that they're writing. I think you shouldn't expect yourself to go too far from like the average type of research that's being done. Like, of course, your projects are going to be slightly different, but on average, you can get a good feel from reading their papers. I also looked at where the PhD students went after their PhD program. So at Northwestern, a lot of them went into clinical research facilities. Vanderbilt, a lot of them went into industry. Caltech, a lot of them went into academia. And so I knew that I wanted to stay in academia, so that was something that I paid attention to. And then of course, everyone tells you pay attention to the fit, whatever that means. You have to figure that out. And so this is the second lesson. It was hard to come up with lessons, but these are the ones I came up with, which is that really starting these new programs is an opportunity to expand what your current skill set is. So you can kind of think them as like, in industry, they call them lateral moves versus like upward moves. Like when you start a new program, it's kind of your opportunity to do something different. And so for me, I had a lot of experience in this design and prototyping space, and I really wanted to go into control. And so on top of everything I said, a big decision for me to choose Caltech was that I knew I wanted to make this shift towards a lab that had more focus and control. Of course, that's kind of hard to do because they're not going to hire you if it's completely something that you've never done before. So you can't completely switch, but you can at least think of it as what new perspectives am I going to get. So for me, that's a lot of how to make my decision. So yeah, talking about my actual PhD program now. This is the name of my thesis. So I maybe made too long of a name, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I actually did. And we're going to dissect it, but yeah, when we had a little end of year ceremony for the people getting their PhDs, who had just defended, and they made us all stand up and try and remember what our thesis titles were, and not a single person could do it. I was very bad, but anyways, this is what it is. Enabling robust and user customized bipedal locomotion on lower body assistive devices via hybrid system theory and practice based. So we'll dissect what that means. But regardless of the PhD program, kind of all PhDs have the same structure. So for those of you going into a PhD program, this is exactly kind of the way every single PhD program is structured. The only differences are what's entailed in each step and when they happen. But for the most part, all you need in the PhD is to satisfy these three things. So the first one is some form of a qualifying exam. That's really just seeing, do you know the technical details? Can you stand in front of a room? Well, now sometimes they do more research-based, but for me, it was more technically based. But can you speak intelligently when someone's asking you questions? Like, are you able to learn the material that you've been given? So that's the qualifying exam. The thesis proposal, we also call this candidacy sometimes, is just, can you come up with a good research problem? Can you think critically about research? Sometimes they merge these into one, but for the most part, they're separate. Yeah, can you strategize about how to solve these problems? And then the very end of it, so usually these happen relatively soon, and then there's like 5-6 years that go on until just at some point in time, you write a thesis defense and you say, this is what I did. And a committee of people say that's enough or that's not enough. And that's really all you have to do. Make it sound simple, but yeah, it's just, can you successfully actually accomplish everything that you said you were going to do in this step? Usually they look nothing the same, but theoretically they're supposed to be the same thing. Yeah, and so this is a funny anecdote then. So I say all that, right? And a lot of people look at the PhD program and they think, oh, that looks fun. That's easy. Why are you stressed? Right? And so my husband is in industry, and he was a Georgia Tech student too. So we met 10 years ago now. And he did the whole industry path. And so we really had a lot of practice talking about the different types of stress of the two, the industry path versus the academia path. Because sometimes I look at him, and I'm like, why are you stressed? And he'll look at me and he's like, why are you stressed? Because I think our stresses come from very different places. And so pros and cons of the PhD program in terms of stress. I think the pro, like we have a very flexible schedule, right? So it's not like industry where you have very strict deadlines and very strict timelines. Like in general, we have a pretty flexible schedule. I think this lack of structure is where the stress comes from. So the fact that we don't have somebody telling us what to do and when to do it, I think is what makes it stressful, but in a very different way. There are very rewarding milestones. So every time you publish a paper, it's like you're on a little high. It's a very rewarding thing when your paper gets published. But yeah, there's a constant fear of, should I be doing more? Should I be publishing more? Like you don't really know what the right amount is. And then it's almost honestly like a drug where then you're craving that next milestone in a way. I'm not making it sound good, but it is rewarding. Okay, and then at the end of the 5 or 6 years, you do obtain a degree that opens a lot of doors. So you can do these kind of more research-based positions, and you get to think kind of at this really fun high level. And I think that is what a PhD in some ways affords you. But you do miss income for those 5 to 6 years. So that's something to think about that I think not enough people think about. And then you do have the ability to control your own projects. But that is, again, where a lot of the stress comes from is, did I pick the right projects? Like, what if AI comes along and completely erases this thing that I've been working 5, 6 years on? It's a real concern for a lot of us right now. But we get to control what we work on, which is. So I think how I'd summarize it is, in academia, the stress stems from this lack of structure, the inability to compare yourself with others, and the lack of accountability. I think alternatively in industry, the stress comes from constantly having too much work, like you're constantly kind of overloaded and you're not able to control the work schedule yourself. So I don't think one is more stressful than the other. I think they're stressful in different ways. That's something that it's taken me like 5, 6 years to wrap my head around. Okay, so my specific trajectory looks like this. And really the lesson takeaway is just like progress is nonlinear. So for me, it was a 6-year PhD, a lot because COVID happened right here. So that's like a big X in terms of productivity. But a lot of, so year one, it was, for me, we had qualifying exams and all of our courses in the first year. Like you just get rid of all of them in that first year. That's not really typical. So I only really started research the second year, and we did our thesis proposal or the candidacy this year. So I only really started research this year 3. I did some fun stuff, some exciting stuff, got a few papers out. And then year 4, COVID happened and none of us really were productive. I played a lot of video games, which was fun, but not productive. Year 5, I started kind of doing some stuff. I went on the job market this year, so that kind of deterred from research. So this was another kind of little slump. And then year 6, I did a lot of productive things again, because I finally felt like I had time. So it was really only year 3 and year 6 that the majority of my research happened, but it takes 6 years to bundle those thoughts and get the motivation and find the right ideas. And so I think, yeah, that's another thing is people always think we're supposed to be steadily progressing, and I don't think it's like that at all. I think this is very nonlinear process. Okay, so my PhD in a picture looks like this. So at the heart of what I did, I took bipedal locomotion and I said, okay, how can we actually achieve bipedal locomotion? And then I took state-of-the-art assistive devices, which currently use crutches. And so wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to use crutches because you understand locomotion? And then together, if you put them together, you get this assistive device. So this, I'll talk about the specific device in a second, but the goal is to get crutchless, dynamic, so not statically stable. There were some devices that could achieve crutchless, but they move at like a snail's pace. Like they're the slowest things you've ever seen because they'd shift their weight to one foot, move the other one, shift their weight to this foot, move the other one. So we call that statically stable. So this was the first dynamically stable crutchless exo for people with motor complete paraplegia. So this subject has no sensation or motor control below space. And so, yeah, this is the device. It's the Adelante exoskeleton. It's a 18 degree of freedom robot, which means that it is 6 degrees of freedom in the torso, and it has 12 motors to control the full motion of the legs. So 3 in each hip, 1 in each knee, and then 2 in each ankle. So 18 degrees of freedom total. Just position, if you take a velocity, is 36. Oh, and it's designed by a company in France named Woodruff. So we did not design the device, we just get to use it, which I've learned is the way I like to operate. So lower body exos in general, there's 3 types. One is to augment able-bodied people. One is purely for rehabilitation, so it can be fixed to a harness, it can be fixed to overhead support, and then one is for exoskeletons to restore your walking. So this is the application that I'm interested in. But if you were going to do something like this, you'd kind of use different methods, is my point. There's a lot of benefits. From a clinical perspective, the 2 that I find most interesting is we haven't proven yet, but it is expected that using an exo can actually restore some amount of locomotor recovery yourself or patients to walk under their own muscle control. And then there's hypotheses that the arm motions actually are important for this. So this is just motivation why we want to move towards crutchless. And then there's the human component. So it gives people a lot of restored confidence to stand up tall again. And if you lose that, that becomes very important. Arguably not as important as all these health benefits. So they're actually way more concerned about restoring these. Yeah, there's two main challenges with, so the question is like, okay, if we can do this, right? Why is this hard? It's a fair question to ask. I've broken it down into two conclusions. One is our system model becomes uncertain when you have a human in it, right? The human is constantly changing. Different people should be modeled differently. And in general, we don't know how to model humans. So we have a very uncertain model. My solution towards this is to get more robust behaviors. So the idea being using this hybrid system theory stuff, blah, 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 so you can get more robust behaviors. The second challenge is that people have emotions. So this robot, you can tell it to do whatever it wants and it will never complain. The human might complain. So to handle this, we wanted to be able to directly optimize exo walking for user comfort using preference-based learning. A fair question is, aren't bipeds easy? They're blowing up in society. This is a slide that I've recently added because it's true. You see a ton of bipeds all over the industry right now. So this was the original biped. This was the Asimo robot back Honda in 2013. It has this, we call it ZMP or zero moment point style walking, which is this bent legs kind of walking phenomenon. More recently, so there's Digit, that's agility robotics. You guys have one here at Georgia Tech. Aptronic has come out with Apollo, of course, the Tesla. This is actually even now an outdated video. They have a new video. Figure that's also an outdated video by now. They have a new robot, and then Unitree. But the conclusion really is that there's one feature of all of these gates that I would argue the current control methods can't go away from these. Is that one, so they have a crouch gait. You'll notice all the knees are really bent. It allows us to do reduced order model solutions without coming up with infeasibilities at the knee. So it's very technical, but it's something that we can't do when there's a human inside of it. Like our ankles are not flexible enough to be able to accommodate this crouch gait. There's also this lightweight feet, and this makes it so that the legs are as light as possible. So you can have this massless leg assumption hold true. And because of these small lightweight feet, you have to step frequently because you don't have very strong ankle mothers. And so I think if the goal is only to get bipedal locomotion, I think the style of walking is fine. But I think if we want to go towards more natural locomotion, maybe something that looks more like this, we can't use the existing state-of-the-art methods. My little defense slide. Okay, so I realize I made this an hour-long talk, but I want to give more time for questions. So I'm going to kind of skip through a lot of this. We use something called hybrid zero dynamics, which is this theoretical framework. You set up your hybrid system with a continuous swing and then an impact event. Because you set it up this way, you can have these provable guarantees of stability for your full dynamics. You put that into an optimization problem that has all these constraints, and it solves for, this is it solving in the background, it solves for a gate. You put the gate on the actual hardware, and you should have this theoretically stable walking, right? Well, in practice, what actually happens is the stability guarantees don't translate because you have model uncertainty. So because you have friction effects and real world disturbances such as uneven terrain or friction in the motors, some gates are good. So this is like a good gate and some gates are bad. And so in practice, we just tune them. We find these additional constraints that we can add so that we can kind of play with the shape of the trajectory until we find one that is a robust gate. And so the goal of kind of what I was wanting to do with all of my research is how can we mathematically describe the robustness to systematically generate the gates that are robust. And so I did that. I'm going to skip through all this. It's not super important, but basically we can have this metric for robustness. So this is a gate that has both robustness and energy efficiency in it. This is a gate that's only robust, so that's not a solution either. Oh, it stopped. Okay. It's not good to be only robust, but if you look at only energy efficiency, you're not going to be robust. There's just small perturbations. So we put this on hardware. And again, this is the one that has both robustness and stability. We did this. This is fun. It's 6 different human subject models. You can't see them, but it's 6 different models and just open loop. And so this one, of course, they all fall very fast. This one stays stable for a longer period of time. And if it's only robust, it also doesn't work. This is just with a human in it. Again, the one in the middle has both energy efficiency and robustness. That's me. That's Amy. This is what grad students do. You just get to play with robots. And then we did some robustness testing again on the Amber robot. I'm going to skip to a fun video. Well, slightly different experiment. And then this is a fun video. I just like nucleating this. You wanted it to step on the blocks and it kept listening. It's too robust. Yeah, so this was the first kind of half. It was very good for synthesizing these robust gates, but we didn't have guarantees of robustness. So we did develop a method that was able to give us guarantees of which gates, how much variations in step height they could have. That was a different word. So that was the first one. How do we get more robust gates? The second one, how do you directly optimize for user comfort? We use preference-based learning. So this was the second half of my PhD, chapter 2 of the thesis. It's actually chapter 3, but it's okay. You have a learning algorithm. The learning algorithm, you want to give a gate to a person, and then you want to collect some sort of reward back from the person that then you can update your algorithm and continue giving them gates until you find a gate that they like, right? So this is classic interactive learning, iterative interactive learning. And there are two questions. One, how do we describe exoskeleton walking? So, right, what does it mean to give someone a gate? How do you parameterize that in a way that you can use in an algorithm? We created a gate library. So you can think about all of the parameters like step length, step duration, step height was one of them, maximum amount that your pelvis was going to yaw during the gait. All of these parameters that are actually the same ones we put as constraints in the optimization problem. That's how we're going to parameterize the exo gates. And two, how do we describe what good means? And so historically, people tried to do this by coming up with these super complicated reward functions. It's very similar to reward function tuning for like reinforcement learning, where you have all of these different terms you care about, but how do you know how to weight them all? Maybe we could measure how much they're accelerating versus how fast they're going. Like we can try and come up with these metrics, or what we did is we just asked them a preference. So this is a busy slide, but these are the preferences that we asked them. So one is a pairwise preference. So we give them two options and we say, or we give them sequentially different gates. And we say, which did you like this current gate more or less than the last gate? So it's just a preference. You don't have to tell me why. You don't have to tell me anything about it. Just, do you like it more or less? We then also added suggestions. So what other parameter would you prefer? So do you want something with a longer step length? Do you want something that's faster? We can add that to the data. And then we can say, give it a category. Is it very bad, bad, very good, good? Okay. However many you want to do, that's the label. So this is what the end of that would look like, where you have a, oh, it's very dark. Can you see that?
Okay.
Oh, now it's back. Okay. So this would be what a least preferred gate during the whole time looked like. Afterwards, we refit the model. This was the one we preferred the least. That's weird. Well, oh well. There's an average preferred one. It walks a little bit better. It doesn't stumble, but he's not super comfortable. And then this one was good walking. You just have to trust him on that. Oh no. Okay, so we thought, can this method be applied to other applications? At the end of the day, you're just updating a model. You're translating that into an action you can execute. You're executing the behavior on the robot, and then you're just obtaining subjective feedback from the human. The idea was, yes, it's effective towards any application that relies on user intuition. So anything that a human has to give an answer for that you can't numerically come up with a reward function for would be good. So we thought, let's bring it back to Amber, this planar biped. Let's put springs in the feet. Let's not say that we're putting, like, let's not tell the algorithm or the optimization problem that we're putting springs in it. And let's just ask a human which one looks better. Let's try and learn which gate looks the best. Oh no. What are the coolest videos? Okay, well, you can look in the middle one. So this was the beginning, or no, this is the middle. Okay, this is where we got to though. You can look at this one. That one kind of works. That one doesn't work. But we got this pretty nice spring foot walking just from asking a person which gait looks better. And it's something that we hadn't been able to accomplish before. And you know that your research is successful when this is the one that we show now on demos. So when people would come through the tour and we'd show them the robots, this was the gait that we would actually show them. And so yeah, that was the conclusion of my thesis, that translating bipedal locomotion relies on both formal understanding of locomotion for robustness, and then also this user customization that we get through control. And then we put it on a lot of different real world applications. So moving forward, so I do have a lab now, so I want to continue doing the same things. If I want to continue looking at nonlinear control and machine learning separately and how we can bring them together to have this learning and control framework for assistive devices. Oh, and I think I had something back here, which is just, this is kind of my philosophy, which is I think we should take advantage of the structure of the things we do know. So I don't think we should completely throw away models, right? Like let's take advantage of the things we do know about our systems. And let's use learning to shape the behavior of things that we don't know. So I like using them both. I'm not only a model-based person, but I'm also not only a learning-based person. Yeah, and then so this is my last lesson. Well, no, this is my second to last lesson, which is there's a lot of really interesting research in the intersection between fields. So for me, my intersection is control theory and robotics. So I think it's really fun to think about how we can take these very rigorous methods from the world of control theory and actually practically apply them to real robots. And I think being able to successfully do that relies on understanding both the fields and where they can actually intersect. And then, yeah, this is the last lesson. So I strongly believe it's not the destination, it's the journey, right? That's like a famous quote. I didn't come up with it. And I had a lot of fun in my PhD. So I think it was a very stressful time, and it's easy now to stand up here and say, look at all the cool things that I did, but I think it's more the process of getting there that was the rewarding part. And so these are all my lab members. And then that's the share program photo. There's some familiar faces here. Most of these are Georgia Tech alum too, actually. He was a Georgia Tech alum. He was a Georgia Tech alum. I'm sure there's others in there, I just don't see them. Yeah. She was a Georgia Tech alum. Okay, so that's it. We have 15 minutes for questions, not as much as before. Feel free to email me too if you want to talk about anything else, but happy to take questions.
Let's go ahead and get Maegan over here. Feel free to take questions from any of our attendees in the room. You guys can feel free to just raise your hand or stand up, and we can also take questions from anyone who's joining us online. Feel free to leave your questions in the chat or the Q&A feature. Anyone?
I was at the women's panel, which was amazing. So I was intrigued to come back to hear what you wanted to say about the personal experience. I had two questions.
Yeah.
One was, what inspired you to work with exoskeletons in your research versus something else? And then the second question is, with all of these universities doing research on exoskeletons, do you guys ever duplicate your efforts, or is there a competition that occurs?
Yeah.
And what happens when you bring it to market? How many people have actually brought their exoskeletons?
Oh, such great question. So, what was the first question?
What inspired you?
What inspired me? Yeah, I got distracted by the later questions. That's a relevant question. I always liked prosthetics. So I grew up in Boston. One of the major prosthetic researchers there, he's Hugh Hurt. He has a very inspirational story where he is a bilateral amputee himself, and he develops probably what we have as the state of the art ankle prosthetics that exist. And I was always very inspired to use what I like about robotics and also help create these assistive technologies. He has a really cool quote that's like, human beings can't be broken, technology is broken, technology is inadequate. Yeah. Like, and so his whole thing is like, he wasn't happy with the state of the art prosthetics. He wanted to make better ones. And so he did. And I always admired that. And I really liked the field. So I originally wanted to do prosthetics. And then I fell in love with more of the exo side of things, because I think what assistive technologies, where they fail is they usually rely on the human providing the locomotion. So including, I would argue, Hugh stuff, it relies on the human to actually provide the walking stability, and then it can facilitate the human in being able to walk, but the human has to provide the stability part. And so I think what was unique about the intersection of like control theory for bipeds with assistive devices is that most of those assistive technologies can't provide the stability. So they usually get worse the higher up you go. So like ankle prosthetics are the best prosthetics we have. Ankle exos are the best exos we have. If you go up to knee and ankle, they become a little worse. If you go knee, ankle, hip, there are arguably very few of those. So full lower body or exos, like, right, you need the arm crutches to be stable. So very few people are trying to provide the stability. So that's why I started like doing exos more. It's arguably easier than a prosthetic, purely because you can take over the walking motion. You don't have to worry yet about interacting with the human. But if you wanted to go to like stroke patients, we're going to have to start thinking about that. But for at least paraplegia, you don't have to worry about trying to interact with them so much. We just give them a button that says start, stop. That's the amount of interaction we have. In terms of multiple people doing exo research, I don't know that I would say there's a lot of doubling of efforts. I haven't really experienced that. I'm sure that exists. I haven't experienced it so much. The going and translating, that is a huge issue, but not for the one that you might think. It's my experience that the main issue is actually insurance and convincing the insurance companies that they should be covering these more expensive technologies. So that's a huge part of what we need to as researchers do is show why these devices are beneficial from an insurance perspective. So maybe they help people not fall. Maybe they actually give them the benefits that they would have to go to a hospital to get treated for otherwise. But it can't just be, oh, it's cool. Like insurance won't cover that. So I think that's been the major hurdle in getting these things clinically covered.
Exciting. My mom has mobility issues because she had 2 amputations, a toe on each foot.
Yeah.
And this really intrigues me. And I actually, as a staff member, support Erin Young and Tariqi's labs. And it's really opening my eyes to the possibilities of getting her to walk again.
Yes.
Really without the ability to hold on to another device, a walker or something like that. She's fallen a couple of times. So when I see that you guys are working this type of research, it gives me a lot of hope.
We're trying. It's a hard problem. It is balance, especially. I mean, a lot of people are worried about balance, but it's not an easy problem. So
Take mobility for granted. So it's really
Yes.
great that you all are trying to bring it to the mainstream.
no, we totally take it for granted as humans. I think once you work on bipedal robots, then you realize how hard walking is, but it's not something that you really realize otherwise because we learn at such a young age. And I think we do realize once we lose the ability, but until that happens, that we don't really.
Thank
you. You had a question?
Yeah, I'm curious how your experience was going from your PhD into faculty.
Oh, yeah. I didn't talk about that at all.
Yeah.
It's so different. So it's funny because as grad students, we're really trained. So keep in mind, I've only been on the job since January, so I'm not an expert on the faculty side of things. I guess there's 2 parts. One is the job search process, right? So when you're on the job market and you're searching for jobs, you're trying to really sell your vision. Like schools are hiring you because you have a vision. You're trying to say, this is what I'm gonna do with the next 30 years of my life. Like, this is what my passion is. This is what I'm gonna dedicate myself to do. This is why you should give me $1 million of the startup package to allow me to do this. Usually on average, that's kind of total summed amount. And so it's a big thing to sell, right? And so it's existential a little bit because when you're preparing these job market packets, you're like, what do I want to do for the next 30 years of my life? Like, that's a long time. But you come around to it and you meet a lot of really cool people and you get really inspired. And then you actually start the job and you're like, oh my God, I promised so many things. Like now I actually have to deliver, I have to do them. But the weird thing is you start with nobody. Like it's just you in an empty lab and money. So you do have money, but like you have no students, you have no lab members. That was the one that surprised me because you by the end of your PhD, right, you get used to kind of running your own research, but you always have lab members around you. And so that was the shock to me was, oh my gosh, I don't have like a team. Like, cause you used to have all your lab members, like you might not be working on the same thing, but you're all kind of part of the same team. And then you start the faculty job and it's like, just you. And so you really have to trust your instincts, I think. Like, it's a lot to start. I think it's very similar to doing a startup. I've never done a startup, but they feel similar, where it's like you have this vision, but it doesn't exist and you're trying to make it happen. Yeah, so, and then, okay, so that's like the research side. The other thing about faculty, which is wild, there's so many other aspects to being a faculty member that you just have never done before, like writing grants and teaching. Well, you have some experience as like TAing, but now there's like no rules and you can teach the class however you want to teach it. So there's a lot of fun little niche pockets of the job that maybe wasn't our job before. Like our job was really just write papers. Now it's like, okay, don't do that. Like, let your students do that and you go do these other things. And it's like, oh, okay. So it's a big transition. But I think that the one thing that stays the same is you have to be self-motivated. So the major thing that they look for, in my opinion, on the job market is, will you enjoy having no structure and just doing this? Because I think if you don't enjoy it, there's no, like, I thought grad school had no structure. The faculty job is like way more no structure, because you have no advisor anymore, you have no lab members anymore. You can really do like whatever you want within reason.
First of all, thank you very much for this awesome talk. I just had a quick question. You mentioned you had a brief role, I think it was in R&D at Disney.
Yeah, I can talk.
Where would you say that fell between like the research side of things and the like just regular
Yeah.
NCR type industry?
Great question. I felt like a third year grad student. I think you will be a third year grad student the entire time at that company. Like, and what I mean by that is like, you were the one doing the work. So that's the major difference, is I think as you continue on in academia, you get more and more to the point where you build up teams and kind of you have like teams who do the coding maybe, and you're thinking more about like, okay, what should we be doing? And being at Disney, they're the ones prototyping everything still. So you get to drive your research, but then you're the one that also does it all. So it felt a lot like you were constantly a grad student and Disney was the advisor. So you'd have to go to them. It was very also unstructured. It felt a lot more like research than industry, but with the caveat that you're never going to have complete control, right? Like Disney will say yes or no to you working on projects. And you have to, at the end of the week, submit a time card saying which projects you worked on. So like you have to have approval to be working on those projects. And so, you know, say you want to do something totally wacky that they're not really in support of, well, they do some wacky things. So they might like it, but like you do have to have those conversations of, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what Disney would get out of it. This is why you should be interested in. I think that's a good skill to have anyways, though, is convincing your advisor why you want to do what you want to do. So you just have to get really good at that. But other than that, it's like doing research. You don't have to worry about getting money. That's the nice part.
We actually have a question in the chat as
Yeah.
well. It says, in hindsight, would you do anything different during your undergraduate experience to better prepare yourself for getting a PhD and going into academia?
Oh, no. Maybe take a few more math classes. I went to a very math heavy program. And so I got there and this was a typical experience. I think Georgia Tech, the way that we shaped our undergrad program is a lot more how to solve problems and how to think big picture and how to kind of use the tools that you're given to approach interesting new challenges. But we weren't very like I never took a proof-based math class before. And then Caltech is a very different philosophy where all of their courses are like fundamental math and they don't worry as much about like you'd enter a course. I'm looking at you because you asked the question, but I realized this wasn't your question.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, you'd go into a classroom and they'd be telling you this problem. And you're like, but why? Like, that was the question I was always asking. Like, why do we care? But it's like, okay, that's the Georgia Tech and me talking. That's not that's not how they thought. They thought, isn't this really cool math? Like, look at all the things that you can solve with this math, but the things were abstract. And so, yeah, for me personally, I could have used to read maybe a linear algebra book. Like, I took linear algebra before they redid the math curriculum since I've gone. So apparently now they teach linear algebra. But at the time, you could AP out of it through Calc, but you never took linear algebra because they were combined. And so I never took linear algebra. So that was maybe a mistake. But other than that, I think I was pretty well prepared. I think Georgia Tech did a good job teaching me yeah, the problem solving mentality, which is very similar to the way that we approach research. So in that aspect, I think I was well prepared. But yeah, maybe. Are there other questions? I thought-
From the chat, that's the only question. Yeah.
I guess piggyback off of that question, is there anything you would have done differently when you started grad school? Like, I guess it's such a long
Yes.
process and you,
Yeah.
feel like everybody comes in and they're like, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed.
Yes.
I'm gonna change the world.
Yes.
And so it's like, looking back, what's something you would have done?
So there's two things that I would do differently. One is don't listen to other grad students. To an extent. I think that a lot of grad students, especially for second years, they might be really stressed themselves and they might be projecting their stresses onto you. And so some advice is good advice. Some advice is themselves trying to make them feel better about their own progress by telling you all of these things you should be worried about. So selectively listen to the advice of grad students. I think if professors tell you something, listen to them, right? Like if people who have graduated with a PhD are telling you something, maybe listen to them. But like the current grad students, some of the advice that I got was really bad advice. Like things to be worried about that I shouldn't have been worried about. I would not have listened to that in hindsight. The other one is don't compare yourself to other people. So I think undergrad is unique where you are meant to compare yourself to other people. They give you grades, they give you test scores, they give you rankings, right? Like the honor societies are like, oh, you're in the top 20%. Like they tell you where you are ranked and you are supposed to strive to be better because you're ranked very specifically. And it's a feedback mechanism, right? It's like, you're doing well because you have an A. If you don't have an A, do better. Grad school, that all goes out the window. And so I think we all get there and we look around and we're like, okay, am I doing well? Am I not doing well? And like, you want that feedback mechanism. Like you want to be able to know if you're being successful or not, but you don't have that anymore. Like everyone progresses at a different pace. Everybody has their research projects are all different. So they're all at different paces. Courses, you still have grades, but they honestly don't really grade in grad school. Everyone gets A's, at least at Caltech. They don't care. And so that stops being a mechanism that you can use to compare. So I think, yeah, you kind of go in first year with like this frenzy of like, oh my God, I need feedback. And so you're like, you go to your professor, am I doing well? Am I not doing well? You go to your friends, am I doing well? Am I not doing well? And like, nobody really can answer that. So I think in hindsight, I would have stopped trying to compare myself and you just like trust the process. And it would have been a lot more emotional energy that I would have gotten back. Yeah. It's hard. I mean, we're literally trained to do it. So it's hard to just not do it, but my advice would be to try not to compare yourself to. Yeah. It's a shock to the system. Yeah, but it's fine. Would you guys agree? I mean, are you a grad student?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if they agree with these advice.
I do have one more question from a staff perspective.
Yeah.
Since we are partners in the situation to help support the research, is there any feedback you can give staff members, whether they're administrative or financial or otherwise, that would make the lives of grad students and the PhDs easier?
That's an interesting question. No, just be nice. You already are. Smile. Wave. No, I can't really think of anything. I mean, for us, I'm trying to think of what our staff at Caltech did. They facilitated food. Like they told us when there was free food and where to get the free food. And when there was leftovers, they'd send out a little email saying, hey, there's leftover food here, come get it. That was the most helpful. They'd help, we had food at our lab meetings. So we had an administrative assistant who she would bring the food. And we were supposed to clean up, but we were terrible at it. So sometimes she would help us clean up. Yeah. Other than that, I can't think of, can you guys think of anything?
Feel like checking in with your students, like my advisor never checks in with us in terms of like how we're doing.
Yeah,
So I think, I don't know, making sure to check in with them could be good.
make sure everyone's doing okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it can be nice to have people remember your people, and not just little paper making machines. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's it.
If there are no further questions from our attendees here and our attendees online, let's give Megan another round of applause. For joining us. Thank you to our attendees for joining us in person. If you haven't seen, there's a poster that's outside, and I'll actually put it up here on the screen for our future and remaining ME Shaping the World speaker series. We only have 2 more left for the semester. We have one on April 5th, and that time has actually been identified. It's going to be between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in GTMI auditorium. That will be a panel discussion with alumni students, alumni, as well as current graduate students, a part of the Discovering ME programming, which essentially is a recruiting effort for prospective graduate students. But also they're going to be sharing information to our current undergrads and graduate students, so anyone can feel free to attend. And the last one will be a discussion from one of my inaugural members of the ME Woodruff Young Alumni Council, Mr. Aaron Shaw. He's gonna close us out on April 11th at 3 o'clock, and we will be in love for his talk, and love to 10. Again, thank you very, very much, Megan. You're the only person that joined us twice on the in our ME Shaping the World speaker series this spring, and I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that I didn't know you when you were
An
an
undergrad.
undergrad here. I had started in 2017, but
Oh, that was my
you're-
last year.
you're probably, we're passing ships.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to getting to know you now that you're here. All right, thank you all.
Yeah.